Hello friends, welcome back. I'm Nick. This is MSFS Flight Plans, and not only are we bound and determined to find the best looking, most interesting spots in the world to fly over, but together we're going to try to save the world through simming, one amazing tour at a time. Today we are up in eastern Australia, or I guess down in eastern Australia, from where I am here in Florida, and we're about as far east as you can go because we're going to explore the Gold Coast region. And since it's just been collecting dust in my hangar for months now, I figured we'd try something new. Get it? This is, of course, the Britten-Norman Trislander, which, for all intents and purposes, is an Islander plus a huge engine up on the tail. And I left the static element so you can see this. Look at this. They got a big stand up here to support that thing. And as I was just kind of sitting out here, taking this all in, I was thinking, where do you think the center of gravity is in this thing? Without that huge engine, it's probably, standard somewhere around the middle of the plane here. But with that thing, and you can get one of these that doesn't have the huge nose on it, that's just kind of got a stubby nose, so I can't even imagine. They must have to really front load this thing, because I imagine it is set way forward. And I'm really hoping that when we get in, this thing's not going to pull a wheelie. But I just felt like this felt a little more comfortable to me, having this big nose sticking out here. I even put some bricks up in the front just to keep it a little more centered, since we don't have any other passengers or anything there. So let's get in and start her up. And I got to tell you, I think that this one looks a little bit more polished on the inside than the Islander does. I like both of the planes, but this one just looks a little bit cleaner to me. Neither of them are like super, super refined like a lot of other planes, but they're fun to fly. And I just think this one looks a little better. The biggest difference is you can see an extra lever for everything and extra pumps and all that. So let's go ahead and get her started up. We got to get these things turned off or it will not start up. So let's remove all of our external hardware, all of our external gear, keeping this thing in place. All right, so battery on, get that thing on to start it up, and turn on all of these mags. Yep, there we go. And get these fuel pumps going. We already got our fuel on, so that's good. We got full mix, we got the throttle cracked. Everything's good to go. I'm going to leave that off for a minute because we're going to have to turn that off. So I think what you're supposed to do in real life is turn the rear engine on first so you can make sure it starts up, because you definitely won't be able to hear it once the others start. Okay, we got that one. Port side. And get that out of there. Okay, I heard 3 start up. I think we're in good shape. Let's shut this window because that's pretty loud. So now we can turn the generators on, turn that thing back off, get our yoke back, and turn the pumps off. Check our barrow, that's good to go, and we'll get our transponder on standby. Now let's take a quick peek at the Google map. So there's Australia. We're over here in Queensland, although we are going to head into New South Wales for just a little bit. And to find the Gold Coast, you just need to look for Brisbane here. And there's Gold Coast coming into view. So the airport we're going to leave from is this one up here, Heckfield. Not a great looking airport in real life or the sim, but it was in a good spot, so that's where we're leaving from. And it has 2 runways. There's one really short one that runs this way, but it's in really bad shape. Again, both in real life and the sim. The one that is running this way, which is the one we're going to take off from, has 2 X's on it. So it's supposed to be closed, I think, but it's paved all the way and longer and looks better. So we're going to take off from that one. Then we're going to come on down here because we have a lot of theme parks to explore here. We've got Dreamworld here. Warner Brothers is Wet n Wild connected to that one. We're going to head on south this way because look at this. Huge reservoir, and look what's on the northern end of it. A big flat spot. What could be there? Yeah, the old Hinze Dam. We're going to check that out. And then come over here to see a big stadium, the Seabus Super Stadium. Head on down here because I want to show you the main airport, which is the Gold Coast Airport here. This is where we're going to cross into New South Wales, come around here, circle this little tiny island, and head north. And this is a photogrammetry city. I feel like pretty much everything on this side of the M1 this way is probably photogrammetry, and then it cuts off again right here at this little inlet. So you'll see everything north of that inlet looks a lot better than everything south of the inlet. So then we're just going to come along the coast here because all the downtown area and the skyscrapers and everything are here. Another theme park. We got the SeaWorld here. Then we're going to cruise up over this way, circle back around, and land at... No, that's where we're leaving from. Southport Airfield, which is also really tiny, but looks better than the one we're taking off from. But again, they're just in the right spots, so that's what we're doing. And the sim says it'll be about 40 minutes, but that was with the live weather on, which I did take on my test flight, and then it looked like this, and then got a little further south, and it was raining, so we're not going to do that. This looks a little bit better. And this is the high cloud setting, and this time of day is set at about 9 a.m., which I think looked best for the shadows and everything. Alright, so taxi lights on, parking brake off, and let's get moving. As far as add-ons go, there are 2 payware available from Orbix, of course, because those guys do all the stuff in Australia. But the city's already photogrammetry. Oh, I kind of overshot that. Let me just show you this runway real quick. So you can go down a lot further. There's a grass strip on the other side, and then that way it's the same kind of thing. You see that over there? It just didn't feel very safe taking off from it, so we're going to use this other one here that's probably closed. But the city's already photogrammetry. The thumbnails look good from Orbix, but it was like 15 bucks, and I figured I probably wouldn't be flying out here a lot, and it looked good enough for me, so I didn't get that add-on. They got another one for the big airport, the Gold Coast Airport, also over 15 bucks, and I don't usually buy airports, so I didn't get that one. Other than that, there's a freeware one for the area around downtown that adds a lot of heliports, but nothing else really for scenery or other airports, certainly not this one or the one that we're coming into. So that's all we got, along with the latest Bing map in the map enhancement, which again I think made it look just a little bit better. See that X there? So this place is called Heck Field, aka Jacobs Well Field, and it's a privately owned strip used by the Gold Coast Sports Flying Club. And I think they also have a few flight schools out here. And I could certainly think of a lot worse places to take flying lessons. This would be incredible out here. Don't worry about how bad this looks on the ground. It's going to look a lot better once we get up, not the airport, but everything else. This is just not the greatest spot, but the airport was just too primo as far as location for our flight plan. Alright, so let's do our final checks real quick here. Get the transponder set to altitude mode. Oh, let's turn our avionics on. That's going to be helpful. And we are going to fly this on GPS autopilot. We're going to get up to 3,000 feet for most of it. Once we come along the coast and head north, we'll get down to 2,000, maybe 2,500. And this one will track GPS, obviously, but it will not do an altitude target hold, so what we can do is control the vertical speed till we get up there. It'll lock on the course just fine, but I'm going to have to watch our vertical speed and make sure I do the hold once we get to 3,000 feet. Check the barrel one more time. Taxi lights off, landing lights on, one notch of flaps. And since this isn't a super long runway, I'm going to go ahead and just throttle all the way up, and then we'll let her rip. Here we go. We're moving. Airspeed's alive. Barely. It's on life support. And I think the wind setting here with the high cloud setting is only about 2 knots. Not too bad at all. And rotate. Up we go. Okay, so click the autopilot on. We're already at 1,000 feet a minute, so that's good. Once we hit 300 feet, we'll bring the flaps in. And let's pull the throttle back a little bit and the RPMs. Flaps up. And we'll turn the landing light off. Alright, we're moving. So the reason we're out here is not necessarily because I feel like this is a top-tier city from the visual standpoint, even with the photogrammetry. It's not bad by any means either, but we have gotten a lot of requests for this city over the last year or so. And since I serve at the pleasure of the masses, I figured we'd go ahead and squeeze it in before 2024 hits just to say we did it. Because I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of spots that are going to be high-priority locations once the new sim is released. And man, have I been losing sleep about that. If you watched any of our recent flights, you know what I'm worried about. We'll see how it goes. I've been encouraged by a lot of people who've been in there playing around with the alpha tests. So the fields don't look too bad. As we get higher, they'll look even better. And look what we have right up here on our left, behind this pillar. A nice go-kart track with a dirt track and a paved one. Look at that. Amazing. Okay, so I just need to watch our altitude to make sure I do the hold at 3,000 feet. And then once we level out, getting to 2,100 on the RPMs and 21 inches of manifold pressure seems to be the sweet spot that'll keep us right between the green and the yellow on our airspeed indicator there, so that's what we'll shoot for. So we're going to have several theme parks to check out on this trip. You got a little preview of that when we are on the Google map. The first one is going to be coming up here on our left in just a minute. It's called Dreamworld. And it's actually got 3 attractions at that spot. They got a rides attraction, and then a zoo attraction, and a water park on there. And despite being one of the smallest and oldest of all of these, it may have had the most comprehensive Wikipedia page I've ever come across for a theme park. Very long. I lost interest about halfway through that thing. But the main park opened in December of 1981, and through the first 20 years banged out a handful of record-breaking coasters. That was way back in the early days of coasters. And it sounds like they opened the first animal exhibits during that time as well, but I couldn't get any precise dates for that, despite the copious amounts of information on that wiki page. And then they opened the water park called Whitewater World in 2006, which obviously I could get a date for that one. But the thing that really stuck out to me about this place, and all the others as a matter of fact, is how small their parking areas are. This is going to be it right down here. We'll get a nice view of our side window here. Which is certainly not the case at any of the Orlando attractions out here by me. If you've ever been to Disney or Universal or any of those parks down there, it takes about 30 minutes on a good day just to get from your car to the gate. You got to ride trams and boats and monorails and people movers. It's insane. Which probably would make this a much more attractive spot for me to visit because you wouldn't have to wait in lines forever. Alright, we're coming up on 3,000 feet, so we're about to do our altitude hold. And there we go. So let's bring that throttle and RPM back. And just watch our airspeed. There's the park. Well, I mean, the parking lot looks big there. It's as big as the whole park, but that's not a big parking lot. But you know what? Maybe with 3 parks out here, they can spread the love enough. And this is a real big tourism city, so I imagine they get a lot of people that are wanting to head out there. But that looks really good, doesn't it? So this road right here, which is the M1, everything on this side is probably not photogrammetry. You can tell it looks a little duller. Everything over here is a little bit more vibrant. And I would presume photogrammetry. And you can even tell from here that that is not a top-notch photogrammetry area. Everything's a little bit spiky out there. But the good news is I could turn the graphics settings way up for this thing, and it's going to perform pretty well. Until we get back to that tiny little airport we're coming into, which for some reason, even though not being modded up, stutters quite a bit. So just a few miles south here down the M1, we've got 2 more theme parks. The first one is going to be Warner Brothers Movie World, and that place opened 10 years after Dreamworld back there in 1991, and directly north of a Wet n Wild water park, which opened in 1984. But the Warner Brothers place was built on the site of an existing, albeit much smaller, studio complex that opened in the late 80s, going under, here it is right here, after just a couple years. So they took that over. And you can see they got a little roller coaster down there. This whole area here, I think, is the ride stuff. And then there's the Wet n Wild. But again, not a big parking lot. Down in Orlando, you'd have 5 of these things stacked 3 deep, and trams and stuff running all over the place. So that's probably a pretty quick trip through that place, which would be just delightful. Yep, that looks like a movie type of theme park. All those big studios, which are working. I'll tell you about those later. So along with all these mechanical parks, this whole city is surrounded by national wilderness parks as well. Over that direction, that big green area over there is called the Tambourine National Park. And there's a spot called Witches Falls along a ridge out there, which we can't see from the sim, that was Queensland's first national park in 1908. Although I think collectively Tambourine was parkified in the 1990s fairly recently. And this area directly to our left here, also green and hilly, is called Narang National Park. And that's home to a whole gaggle of typically strange Australian species, including koalas, a flying marsupial called the greater glider, and a flying fox, something called the powerful owl, which looked pretty big, so it probably is pretty powerful. And they got the quirky little echidna down there, which kind of looks like a mix between an aardvark and a hedgehog. Very small. And the tusked frog, which based on all the pictures I could find does not have any actual tusks, which was somewhat disappointing. And then directly ahead of us over this ridge here, this is residential stuff on the top of this ridge, but over the other side of that there's a place called the Canungra Land Warfare Center. And they established that place in 1942 to prepare troops for combat in the jungles of the South Pacific during World War II. And they shut it down after the war and then opened it up again in 1954 as communism began to creep south. And it came in particularly handy during the conflict in Vietnam, as they started cycling 10,000 troops a year through the facility, which must have been a real blast. And although on a much smaller scale, it's still being used by the Royal Military College of Australia today, who sends about 3,000 almost officers through that place each year. We're going a little bit quick and hitting some turbulence, which I didn't have on the last trip. Don't mind that, though. I'm just going to pull that throttle back a hair. Oh, okay, we're going to have a big unveiling here. Right behind our pillar, we'll see in just a minute. We're going to have one doozy of a dam down here to our left. That is the Hinze Dam, which blocked up the Narang River in 1976 to create the massive Advanced Town Lake Reservoir behind it, which supplies fresh water to the Gold Coast. There's not a hydroelectric facility on that. I think it's purely used to make the fresh water, and I guess they were having some flooding along the river here before they did that. And the dam was named after 2 early settlers named Carl and Joanna Hinze, who had built themselves a little slice of heaven, which now sits about 300 feet underwater on the other side of the thing. And today the dam itself is roughly 350 feet tall, over a mile long, and contains 4,621 cubic meters of fill material. But it wasn't always this big. The first version was just 248 feet high, and then they added another 60 feet or so in 1989, and then another 50 feet in 2011. And we're going to get one map seam here. It's going to be the only one. You're going to be able to see it because the water looks really choppy on this side, and then over here you can see it's very placid. And after scoping out this area, I flew down here a little bit. I bet they could add another 100 feet to that thing without putting the whole town underwater, which would be awesome. Not putting the town underwater, but another 100 feet. Who doesn't love a nice tall dam? And if you look on the Google map, which must be before 2011. This part of it, because they built the rest of this in 2011, this part of it's not even on the Google map. So it ends about right here. It looks to be a little bit more shallow than that. So the Google satellite image is apparently a little bit out of date. Boy, this is really choppy. We only got a 5-knot crosswind, but it must be gusting a bit. I found a YouTube video of a guy, it was about 6 minutes long, walking across the top of this. Looked really cool looking down to the spillway here. And for something that's not a POI, that is a really nice looking dam. You can see they got some coloration issues here. And then of course this thing. Boy, it must have been really windy when that picture was taken. Look at that. Oh, look at that, some terracing. You know, I like that. Very nice. Okay, so we're going to start heading over to the coast so we can check out the big airport and a few other sites before coming back up north to see downtown. Look at this place here. Imagine living up there. That would be an amazing view. Really beautiful. The first major landmark we'll encounter is this guy right here. That is the Seabus Super Stadium just north of the town of Robina. And they opened that in 2008, and it is considered a multi-purpose venue today, used mostly for rugby and soccer, and probably footy. And we'll take a nice look at that at our left-hand window. Look at that. Yeah, it's default stuff, but that's pretty neat looking at it. I felt like the colors looked a little drab out here. I reinstalled, well, I didn't reinstall it. I installed for the first time the NVIDIA app, if you guys have an NVIDIA card, which has a lot of nice new one-button functions like card tuning, which is nice because I hate playing with that thing because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up. And there's also a setting where you can click on some presets for the colors and scenery. And I tried it out here. It made it a little bit too vibrant, made it a little more lively looking than this, but it looked somewhat unrealistic. So we left that out. But I feel like this probably looks a little bit too drab for this time of year. It would be springtime out here now. But not too bad. In fact, they got some riding trails and stuff out there. And then there's the city. Okay, so here's Robina, and there's their stadium. This thing over here is called the Robina Town Center, which is what they used to call malls before it became so unfashionable to... Well, they called malls malls before they called them town centers. But this whole area is kind of interesting because it was, when they were planning out, the biggest pre-planned residential community in Australia. And I guess somebody had built a bigger one while they were building it, because by the time it was done, apparently it was no longer holding that title. But it looks pretty good, and there's a stadium. So everything here onto the coast should be photogrammetry, and you can tell it does look a little bit more sharp and bright as far as the colors go. Look at the detailing here with those power lines and stuff. Looks pretty good. And somewhere underneath us right now, there was a spot that caught my eye. It's called the Mudgeeraba Light Horse Museum. And I'd never heard of a light horse, so I figured I better check that out. Being in Australia, I figured it was some kind of tiny little horse breed that was the size of a squirrel and probably flew. But it turns out it's not a horse at all. Not really, anyway. It's what they called a regiment of mounted troops during the early 1900s in World War I. So, yeah, I was a little bit bummed out by that, too. Boy, that is really detailed. Look at that. We're getting a little bit of popping out here. But I warned you, we're going to get some of that. And then right up here we got two really nice looking holes in the ground. This one is a landfill, and then this one is an asphalt plant over here. I think this one's called Reedy Creek. And that one's called the Boral Asphalt Plant. And they both look really good. And if you were flying out here, which I hope you do, you'll definitely spot those, so I'll tell you what those are. Which I just did. Look at that substation. Boy, that looks really good. It's pretty detailed. Roads look pretty good. Bridges look like bridges. Not too bad. This thing here is a nature preserve that is in InSim POI. I don't know why they put a POI on that. And they also put one out in the water that just said Pacific Ocean. So not sure what's up with that. So as far as landfills go, I think that looks pretty good. They got a big tarp over there in the satellite map. This is all open here, but you can even see a little bit of the trash and stuff on the sides. And then look at this thing. Very nice. There's the asphalt plant. So in just a few miles, we're going to cross over from Queensland and into New South Wales before turning back north. So I'll tell you a little bit about the airport. In fact, the airport, the runway, the big runway, straddles the border between the two areas from north to south, which I thought was kind of unique. Well, we got some flat stuff there. So strange to me that that would happen. Boy, there's a lot of that I saw in 2024 too, so I don't think they fixed that problem. I was hoping they would, but it doesn't. In fact, I might have even seen more of it in the 2024 footage I've seen so far. One of several reasons I'm a little bit nervous about all that. So this spot right here, I'll tell you about this, and then I'll get back to the airport. This is called the Kabaki Lakes area, and I thought this might be a big nature preserve because on all the satellite images, including that Google one, which is at least 13 years old, this still looks just like this, but then this green area over here is a nature preserve. But they got roads going all through here, so I'm thinking it may be a failed residential startup because it's looked like that for so long. And I say that because we've had a lot of those here by us in Jacksonville. After that first real estate housing bust in the early 2000s, there was a lot of areas by me that looked like that. They cleared all the trees and then put the roads in, and then everything fell apart and it just sat like that forever. So I'm thinking that's probably what that is. If you're from around this area, let me know if I'm right about that. But that's a familiar looking site to me. Okay, so getting on to the airport, which we're going to see from this side and the other side. And that runway's kind of dark, it's hard to see it, but this is it right here. The first time it opened in 1936, all the way up until 1989, it was originally called the Coolangatta Airport, which is an Aboriginal word that means place of good view, and it certainly is that. And it was originally comprised of 3 grass strips that were intended to be used for airmail emergency landings, as those guys were traveling from Brisbane, just north of here, down to Sydney, which is a pretty good ways to the south. And they started commercial service out there in 1939. And during the war, it was used primarily for U.S. troops heading down here from the Pacific Theater for a little R&R, which I'm sure was a welcome sight for those guys. Look at this. That's pretty detailed there. Take a little 3-wheeler or 4-wheeler out there, or maybe even a 2-wheeler. Yep, that looks like exactly what that is. A new community that never really got off the ground. Otherwise, I figure they probably would just left the trees there if it was part of the preserve. But in 1958 is when they finally paved the runways and they built the current terminal, which I think is still in the same condition it was all the way back in 1981. And the only serious incident they've had out here occurred in 1949 when the Lockheed Lodestar traveling north to Archerfield, which isn't too far from here, stalled at 500 feet and crashed, killing all 21 on board and making it the worst civil aviation disaster in Queensland's history, which isn't too bad if that's your worst disaster. Okay, so as we loop around to the north here, we'll be circling the town of Tweed Heads, which is going to be right up here on our left. And that sits along the mouth of the Tweed River, which runs right down in through here, which is just a short little guy. It's only about 48 miles long. But right along the banks of it there look pretty nice, really developed. Looks like it's probably a beautiful area to live. The first non-Aboriginal people moved out here in the 1840s to harvest timber. And once all that was cleared, they threw some banana and sugarcane fields out here in the area. But these days it's mostly a tourist destination for folks heading up to the Gold Coast region. And for the more adventurous type, about 20 miles to the southwest, which we really can't see from here, but we'll check it out when we're heading north. We'll see it a lot better. You can check out Mount Warning, which was one of the largest shield volcanoes in the southern hemisphere. And I'll show that to you on the satellite map when we're done, because it looks good. I bet it looks good in the sim too. But the volcano itself is long gone. What you can still see is the 3,800-foot high plug that was once part of the original peak. And that is believed to have been at least twice as high when it was a full-blown volcano. But they think that thing probably huffed its last around 20 million years ago, so it's been gone for quite a while. And this little thing right here is part of that whole volcanic system. That's called Cook Island. And it was a remnant of a lava flow that came all the way over from that volcano. So that's all volcanic rock down there. It got its name from Captain James Cook. Yes, that's the same Captain Cook who had his head bashed in on that beach we saw on one of our Hawaii trips, the one where we saw that big volcano. And he also happens to be the guy who mapped out about half the planet in the 1700s, including this area, which is why he got an island named after him. And just in case you missed that Hawaii trip, I'd like to remind you that the locals cooked Mr. Cook's corpse to remove the flesh before they returned his skeleton to his crew, which was actually a sign of reverence. They weren't doing it to torture him. That's what they did for people they really admired. So that's a nice little memory hook to help you out at trivia night. Mr. Cook was cooked in Hawaii. If the question is, where did he meet his demise? So I think what we'll do here is come down to 2,000 feet since we're just going to be over the water. And then we'll just hold there until we're ready to come in for our approach. But I need to keep an eye on that. How's our fuel looking? Not too bad. Let's do a little transfer here just to get it over from those wings into the center. Not that it'll make much difference in the sun, but it's something fun to click and play with, so we'll do that as we're swinging around here. And you'll have no trouble spotting where the photogrammetry ends and begins up here, because there's going to be a jetty where the southern breakwater is all bare looking and the other one is much more vibrant to the north of it. They said if you're going to go to that island, good luck parking your boat there. It's a lot more steep than that in real life. You can tell from the satellite image, it just comes right down to a cliff, and they said there's some really rough currents out there. So just a heads up for that. We're going to take your seaplane out there and throw the anchor in. Alright, click and click. Man, I could click switches all day long. Ooh, we're going pretty quick. And we're at 2,000 feet, so we'll just hold there and then set everything back at the 2100 mark. RPM's up and throttle up. Man, I don't know what happened, but that last trip we took 2 flights ago up in western Great Britain, we've gotten like 5,000 views for that thing in the last week. And I just wish I knew what YouTube likes so much about it. And we picked up like 300 subscribers. I mean, it's just fantastic. Don't know why. I thought it was not significantly better than all of our other flights, but that's fantastic. I wish I could do that more often, whatever happened. We'll see how that goes. And man, if you saw that flight, I was bragging about how I thought I correctly pronounced Haysham, which looks like Haysham. I went online and found a pronunciation guide where 2 different sites, they were saying that it's not Haysham, it's Haysham. And then someone who lived out there said it's actually pronounced Hesham. So that's what I get. Those cliffs look pretty good. Look at that. These beaches all look pretty good. But you can see the photogrammetry here, not the best. And I'm sure the Orbix pack would have done that up, but the problem with that is, if it looks too much better, then they all really stick out at you as being modded up. So save the $15 and just have it look like this, unless you're from here and want to fly here all the time. But not too bad. Look at that, they got a little tidal pool over there. And I think this is Mount Warning over here. Let me take a look at little NavMap. Yeah, that seems to be in about the right spot. Yep, I think that's it. Looks good. And it does not look that big from the satellite image. So that's pretty high, 3,800 feet. But imagine if it was twice that high, how big that would be sticking up there. But no, it was around 28 million years ago. 20 million years ago. Alright, we'll pick it up just a little bit, try to keep it right at 140 knots of airspeed. And we got a crosswind of 5 knots. And we're not jerking around as much, so that might have just been some turbulence over those mountains. Got a little bit of tiling there over the ground. So we'll check out all the big buildings along the coast as we cruise past downtown, but there are way too many to point out anything specific, so we'll just note the tallest of them all. And we'll move on to the general history of the Gold Coast. And I'll just add that the top 30 tallest buildings are all residential out here, with a few of them also having some hotels in them, it looks like. So none of these are office buildings. But the biggest one is called Q1, and you won't miss it because it's really, really big, also purely residential. And that was completed in 2005, has 78 floors, and tops out at 1,060 feet if you include the spire. I think it's around 780 or so for floors you can actually walk around. Not too bad. If you're wondering what I think, someone had asked me what I think the best looking cities we've flown over, and we've got almost 200 flights up now, so I've seen quite a few, and you guys know I'm always looking with excruciating detail at the ground. I would say, just off the top of my head, the 2 best are probably San Francisco, that we've checked out so far, and Turin in Italy. And for nighttime flying, I think that Las Vegas with that add-on pack takes the cake by a very long margin. Paris isn't too bad, but the performance isn't great out there. Las Vegas is unbelievable, and I haven't head back out there since this sim touched it up. So in other words, without the add-on pack in there. And here's that nature preserve that got the POI on it, along with the Pacific Ocean. So there it is. They did it up for us. Alright, so a little bit of the history of how this place got here now that we got some downtime. For one thing, the Gold Coast is the 2nd largest city in Queensland after Brisbane, and the 6th largest in the whole country, and most populated non-capital city in the whole country. But this is Australia, and we saw those little parking lots. They've got around 650,000 residents out here, which puts it roughly on par with Boston for U.S. cities. But this place has 4 times the land area of Boston, so it's pretty spread out. The first Europeans arrived in the early 1800s, but the Aboriginal folks have been living out here perhaps as long as 50,000 years or more. Significantly longer than Homo sapiens have been up in Europe or the Americas. But in the 1870s, a few small settlements popped up as people started opening little seaports along the rivers and doing a decent bit of timber harvesting. And there are even a few wealthy Brisbaneites who built some vacation homes out here. Alright, so there's the tall one right there. Actually, there's quite a few that are pretty close in height to that thing, aren't there? And then right on the other side of these here, this is where the convention center is. This is a mall over here. And they got a little race course over here. Nothing real fancy about that. That one opened as a race course in the 1850s, I think. And then they started really picking up business there in the mid-1900s. But much to the chagrin of the wealthier folks down here, it didn't take long for the rabble to start moving down to enjoy their own slice of Gold Coast heaven, giving rise to something called the Seaside Shack, which were little bungalows built literally out of trash. It sounds like people were just grabbing scraps of metal and lumber off the docks and even some discarded tram cars and just throwing a little shanty up down here by the water. There's the mall. But the construction of a proper establishment called the Surfers Paradise Hotel in the 1920s is what really kicked off the migration and ensuing real estate boom, prompting what was formerly known as the South Coast to gain the nickname Gold Coast, as a reference to the insane home prices of the 1950s. So that's a convention center right there. And then here comes the big boys. And then by the 1980s, especially after they built that Dreamworld theme park, this had become one of the hottest tourist destinations in all of Australia. And if you'd like to come out here and check it out for yourself, you can pack light. It rarely drops below 50 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter months, which would be our summer months in the northern hemisphere. And during the summer, it stays fairly mild, although I imagine the humidity can be a bit of a consideration out here. Look at that, there's the Q1. In fact, it's probably not too much different than the weather where I live here in Jacksonville. They're at almost the same latitude south as we are to the north. Now that building looks pretty good. Look at that one. That one looks really good. I don't know why that one came out so well. Okay, we got one more theme park up here to scope out, and this one is a SeaWorld, also with a tiny parking lot. This is going to be it right up here. And there's their tiny parking lot. And I should add that this one has no affiliation with the American brand. These guys are associated with the guys that own the Warner Brother place and the Wet n Wild, called Village Roadshow, which also runs most of the production studios out here, which, again, are still active. They filmed a lot of movies out there. Aquaman, Thor, Chronicles of Narnia, Pirates of the Caribbean, the recent Elvis flick, among at least 30 other titles that I recognized on that list. But SeaWorld here got to start in 1971 as Surfers Paradise Ski Gardens, doing water ski shows, which might be the last thing on Earth I'd be interested in watching. And a few years later, they started bringing in wildlife and bought out their local competitor, Marineland. And during the 1980s, they managed to claim several titles as Australia's best tourist attraction. And having been to a lot of similar establishments over the years, I think that might be more of a statement about the rest of Australia's attractions back in the 80s than how mind-blowing this was, but I could be wrong about that. You know what, I do prefer SeaWorld in Orlando, though, over most of the other parks, but that's mainly due to the smaller crowds. I've never been a big fan of whale and dolphin shows, though. For me, those things are kind of like NASCAR. Really just waiting to see if one's going to attack one of the trainers. Not that I want to see that, but who wants to see a NASCAR wreck either, right? And this thing here is called the Spit. And not just this, it's that whole area south of this. SeaWorld's also in the Spit. And this is not a man-made opening here. That formed during a storm in 1898 when some rough seas split this barrier island right in two. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, so we need to come down a little bit more. I'm going to come down to 1,500 feet, and then we're going to come in on our base leg here in just a bit. So we'll slow down, and this time I'll remember to pull those throttles back some. And while we're doing that, I'll take care of our announcements. If you want to take this flight plan just like we are, I mapped this out meticulously as always. If you're flying it at 3,000 feet over land and 2,000 to 2,500 over the water, this will get you in the best spot to see pretty much everything we were looking at on the trip. So if you want to load it up into little NavMap, the link for that will be in the video description. If you don't know how to get it into little NavMap or even use little NavMap, check out our how-to section on our YouTube channel. I've got several tutorials in there that are very brief and to the point that'll get you up and running in no time. And the bookmark file will also be in here, so if you want to track it in real time, you can also do that. You'll know where everything is as you're flying around. And you can also hop on our Discord server. The link for that will be in the video description. We're going to have a helicopter group flight coming up here in probably another week and a half, 2 weeks, and I think we're going to wind up, someone suggested we fly over Naples and Pompeii, which looks great, so that might be a really cool spot. Vesuvius is over there, so that might be just what we wind up doing unless someone comes up with a better idea between now and then. Not only that, but it's an awesome place to hang out. We've got over 100 members in there now. It is just really cool. Lots of conversations about 2024. Lots of speculations. Lots of people trying to calm me down as I get nervous about it. And if you got a place we just got to check out, let us know in there too in our Suggest a Flight section. And that will enter you if we decide to upload the flight, and I upload most of them, in our quarterly flight plan competition. All I need to know is the departure airport, arrival airport, and some things to check out in between. I'll take it from there. And we'll vote as a sim community at the end of the quarter. Winner gets a $50 gift card to the sim vendor of your choice, assuming they offer gift cards, of course. So that's a lot of fun, too. Hop in there and check it out. Really neat place. And lastly, I'm just going to keep mentioning this. I am wanting to redo the logo for this channel, which is just so basic. I paid for that thing when we first started the channel. Got it off of Fiverr. I'd like to get an animation of some kind and a new logo, so if you're good at graphic design stuff, I don't mind paying you for that. Just let me know. I'm not very creative and I don't know how to do that stuff, so I need a little bit of help with that. Just drop me a line. I'll get in touch with you. Okay, so the airport is... Can't see it yet. And man, this thing has a skinny little runway. It's 30 feet wide. That's it right there. And only about 2,800 feet long, but this thing will get down no problem. We're still going a little quick, aren't we? So once we get on our runway heading, we'll come on around. And I don't know why we're going to get so much stuttering by this, because again, it's not a modded up airport, but we're going to get a little bit of shimmying. This will be the only spot where it's really bad, if it does it again. Man, why are we cooking so fast? I'm just going to bring the throttles all the way back because we got to go full RPMs anyway for our approach. There it is. Look how skinny that is. This one's also private, and this one along with the one that we took off from are untowered. And I don't even think they have pappies out here. And I think they have a displaced threshold on both ends, and I can understand why on this side, because you can see they got some trees at the end of the runway and the other side too. Those bridges don't look as good as a lot of the others. They're filled in underneath. But that's alright. So we did it. All you guys who want to see the Gold Coast, I hope I did it service. Now we can cross it off our list. Whoa. Alright, now the wind's coming in again. Come on, airspeed, come on down. Coming on down, we've got to get the flaps out. Landing lights on. So once we come down, there'll be a taxiway before we get to the runway, which we'll hit pretty quick. Then we'll pull over and check out a little NavMap. And then we'll put a bow on it. One notch of flaps. For a plane this big, I feel like it doesn't fly as big as other planes this size. It's a little bit more responsive to the inputs, which is fine. Makes it different and fun. And for some reason, these trees right in front of the runway are going to look a little bit jacked up too. Final notch of flaps, and now we can give it some throttle as we come on in here. Cool area. Definitely a cool area. So I think after this one, I have been flying over San Diego. I said I want to do a helicopter trip out there. It looks really nice, but it is pretty performance heavy, kind of like LA. So I'm trying to find a helicopter where I won't have to turn the graphics down too much. And if we can't do that, there's a couple of new GA planes that I've picked up. We can always take those guys out. And I saw they just put out a new Freeware 172 that's gotten some pretty rave reviews, so I'll need to check that as well. Look how skinny this thing is. I don't even think that you'd be landing a plane this size out here. This one's also fully private. So I think our approach speed is probably 80-ish. VREF's probably 70 to 75. I think we're going to make it. Yeah, no pappies that I can see. Yep, and that sock says we do have a bit of a crosswind, but not overbearing. God, that is a skinny runway. That always gives me the nervous jitters. And cut it. Hopefully we won't run out of runway. We'll just flare for a bit. At least get us to the taxiway. And we're down. Okay, flaps up. Yeah, that's displaced on that side, isn't it? It wasn't so bad on the side we came in on. And I think I need to adjust the sensitivity on my rudder pedals, which I'm thinking about upgrading pretty soon because they get really jerky at about the halfway point, like that. But I don't want to do it just for the planes that it applies to, and then all my other planes are jacked up, because not many of them will do that. You know, let's just park right over here. And open the window. Get some nice, fresh sea breeze in here. And we'll park it. Okay, that looks good enough to me. Parking brake on. And props back, mix back. We can just leave everything else on for now. Alright, so let's see what we got here. Trail off, centering off. You know what? That didn't even track our flight. Oh yeah, it did. Here we are. Okay, so here's where we departed from. I wish I could take this airport off so you can see how rough that looks in real life. And if I could take it off, you would see that it looked about like it did in the sim, which was not great. And I don't know why this runway's closed. But again, it's a private place, so maybe it costs a lot to fix that up. So here's our little go-kart track. Extreme karting. We saw that guy as we were coming around. And if you wanted to try to VFR fly this, you could probably just fly down the M1 here for most of the trip because you won't miss the dam over there and then just swing around when you see the airport and head back up the coast. Finding that airport might be a little bit tough because it was tough to pick out if you didn't have something bringing you in there. So here's Dreamworld. This is the first one that opened in 1981. And you can see the parking lot is as big as the whole place, so that's probably about right, I guess. So here's the water park here. The zoo stuff, I think, is up over here. Yeah, wildlife, that's got to be it. And then here's where the rides and stuff are. But they did win several awards for world's biggest, world's fastest, world's this or that in the early 80s out there, so it was once a big-time place, apparently. And then here's the Warner Brothers studios, and all of these are working studios right now. And here's where the theme parks and stuff are. I bet that was touched up by the Orbix Pack, too. And here's the Wet n Wild. That is a small parking lot for a place like that. Again, down in Orlando, it would be 10 times the size of that, which is why it's so unpleasant to go down there. And then we cruise over here. Okay, so here's the Narang National Park. And you can see this thing in there too, the Hansen Narang Quarry. But there was a big seam on the side of this too, like a tiling issue with that, so I didn't point that out. And then over here is where Witches Falls is. So this is Tambourine over here. And again, you can't see them here, but this was the first national park in this region. 1908 is when they named that. At least named it a park. And here's the Land Warfare Center. Oh, what do they have out here? You can't really tell. That looks like a lot of fun though, doesn't it? And here's the old Hinze. So again, in the Google map, this whole part isn't here. So that must be a pretty old map. That looks great. This area here looks great. Really cool. And then here's where those houses were up on the top of that. And then over here we had the stadium, the C-Bus Super Stadium. Did I mark the Light Horse Museum? There it is. There it is, the Light Horse Museum. Not a very big place. It looks like somebody's house. But they're probably passionate about it. And here's Robina, the master planned community, first in Australia. What is that? Oh, it's a university over there. It looks good. And then here's the dump, which in the sim had a big tarp over here, but that looked great. And so did this place over here, the asphalt plant. Oh man, you really can't see that terracing over here because of the shadow, but you could definitely see it in the sim, and it looked phenomenal. Here's Kabaki Lakes. So let me know if that is a failed neighborhood startup, because that's what it appears to be out here. That's not part of the nature preserve, which you can see is over here. And then Mount Warning is over here. Check that out. And you really can't tell how tall that is here from directly above it, but from a distance it looked pretty high, and it used to be twice as high when it was a functioning volcano. I bet that looks neat if you fly out there. Then we came over here to Tweed Heads and Cook Island, which you can tell is a little bit more steep here when you look at it like that. Yeah, you're not pulling a boat up there, especially if the currents are real strong. And here's where the cutoff for the photogrammetry was, right along the Tweed River here. And then we came up along this way to check out downtown, and there's that POI in the sim, the national park. Don't know why they made that, but whatever. And here's the convention center, there's the mall, and then there's the race course we could see, and then here's the Q1. You can spot that because of the massive shadow. But again, there were a lot of really big buildings. You can tell, look how big these shadows are. And I didn't think to look, I mean, it might just be barely taller than the next biggest one, because there was a lot that looked pretty close to that in height. And then here's the SeaWorld here. Now that does look like an undersized parking lot. Here's our little auxiliary parking lot. That might be for, oh no, this is probably employee parking up here. But that's probably a pretty nice place. And then here's the Spit, which was not man-made. And you know, I don't know, they got another one up here. Look at this one. That one looks like a big washout too. So I'm thinking the Spit was the one that carved itself out naturally. That's what Wikipedia said anyway. We had some flat photographic stuff up here, so I didn't draw attention to that. And then we came on in to our airport, which again, we can't see that one either because it's the place where we landed. So that's Gold Coast. I think the next spot is probably going to be San Diego. I just got to fly. We're going to fly out there, but I learned a lot of things. Thanks for the recommendation. Very, very cool. We had some other recommendations after that Great Britain flight for some more places around there, some more places in Australia. So no shortage of places to check out. But be sure to hop on our Discord server if you haven't done that yet. And I cannot wait to see you all again in the skies later.